Hi, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I want to talk to you about how to save cost on your loft conversion without having to do any work at all yourself. So I get a lot of comments on the channel here from people in response to the recent video that we posted talking about how much it costs to convert your loft. And if you haven't seen that video, there's a link to it on the screen here. And a lot of people come to me and say, oh, I did my loft for £10,000 because I did all of the work myself, which is great. But for most of us, that isn't something that's feasible. It's not possible. Firstly, you don't have the time. Secondly, you probably don't have the skills. And thirdly, you don't want the hassle of having to do everything yourself. So this video is focusing in on really easy ways to save money without having to do any of the work yourself. So it's a great way to get that loft done quicker if maybe you haven't quite got enough money yet, or you're really conscious about the budget and you just want to keep the cost as low as possible. So before we get into all of that, if you could give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, that would be great. Okay, so let's talk about the costs in your loft. And the key areas we're going to focus in on are all of the areas that your builder is going to subcontract to somebody else. So here's the news. This is the news flash for this video. Your builder will not employ every single person who works on your loft directly. They will subcontract some of the work. So most building firms don't employ plumbers. They don't employ electricians. They don't have scaffolding themselves. They generally don't employ decorators. And they don't employ people who do drawings. So all of those tasks will be subcontracted to third-party companies. Now, it might be companies that they work with frequently, so they'll have good relationships with a plumber or an electrician, but they aren't paying them directly. They are subcontracting it. And whenever a job is subcontracted, it always increases the price for you because it means that your builder is having to get somebody else through the work, so they're being charged market rate. And then generally your builder will add some profit on top of that for himself. And he may also add 20% VAT onto their charges. So it's cost on cost for you. So if you can strip out some of the costs that your builder is subcontracting, then you will save money on your build. And we'll go through it systematically now, and we'll talk about the sort of figures that you could save on your build. And it really does add up. And it isn't a lot of work for you. And I'll talk you through how to go about doing it and how to find people to do those roles. So let's get into it. Let's break it down systematically. As you go through the loft conversion, we'll talk about it in sequence. So what you will do first, right through to last on the build. Okay, so the starting point is your quote. To make this effective, to save money on your build, you need to get a detailed quote from your builder. And that means breaking everything down into the constituent parts. So when you approach builders, and we've got videos on our channel that talk to you about how to find a builder if you don't know builders, and how best to get numerous quotes. And you can see a link to that here. But when you get your quote from your builder, ask them for a detailed breakdown of the cost. So what you don't want is for them to come back with one lump sum figure saying the cost of your loft conversion is X. That's no good to you because then you can't strip out those costs. What you need is a detailed breakdown that lists out every constituent part. So we mentioned some of the parts just now, but what you're really looking for is how much they're charging you for the drawings, so plans and drawings, how much they're charging you for the scaffolding, and how much they're charging you for all the constituent parts such as the strip out, the plumbing, the electrics, the painting, those sort of items. So you want a detailed breakdown because once you've got a detailed breakdown, you know exactly how much they're charging you for the electrics, for example. So then if you get a quote, you can compare the exact same job because you give the same spec to an independent electrician firm and you can see exactly how much your builder's charging you, how much it's costing in the market and what the difference is. And then you can talk to your builder about switching it out. So we'll get into the detail on that in a minute, but that's why you need a detailed quote. You need the breakdown of all of the costs so that you've then got a benchmark that you can compare to the market and find out whether or not you can save money by doing it directly yourself. Okay, so the first cost saving area is the drawings and the plans. So as you may be aware, you need to have architect's drawings to submit to the council for either permitted development or planning permission. You then need to have structural drawings and calculations, which basically tell your builder exactly what materials he needs to make the loft and also how to build it. So it's got all of the detail in that. You'll also need to do building control. So you'll have to notify building control and give them those drawings. So if you're asking your builder to do all of that for you, ask them to split out the cost of that. And I've seen it with many quotes that it can be £5,000 to £10,000 that some firms are trying to charge you for this paperwork. Sounds outrageous, but I've seen it. I've seen quotes. I've had quotes for deals where they've tried to charge me £10,000 for doing all of those different functions. Now you can do all of that yourself. You don't have to do any of the work. You just need to find some people who do that as their job. So if you identify people who can provide these services for you directly, you will save money. So you should be able to get an architect to do your drawings for something in the region of £1,000. A structural engineer is a similar price, so maybe £2,000 for those two. And then building control, you can submit that yourself. It is very simple. It's an online form that you fill in and then you just send those documents that the other two parties have prepared to them. That's it, job done. So all in, that should cost you somewhere in the region of £2,500. Now have a look how much your builder is asking for to do those services. If it's something like £10,000, then you could have a cost saving of up to £7,500 just for that. And they are not doing any work. Your builder is not doing that work. He's subcontracting it to somebody else. But because he's adding margin on top, and because he's not shopping around, he's not price sensitive, then he's just passing on the cost. So if he's using an expensive architect who's charging him £4,000 or £5,000, that means they're charging you £4,000 or £5,000, when actually you could get that done for maybe £1,000. So there is a big saving to be made on the plans. So ask your builder to split it out into the quote, have a look at it. If it's a big number, then have a look at doing it yourself and you'll be able to save a lot of money. The second area is the scaffolding. So you will need to have scaffolding erected around your house to start the strip out, to take all the tiles off and then complete the build. So generally the scaffolding will be in place for somewhere in the region of 6 weeks. So it'll go on right at the start and then it will come down once it is watertight and you've finished the shell structure. So ask your builder to split out the cost of the scaffolding. The scaffolding will be outsourced to a third party, and I've seen quotes as high as £7,500 for the scaffolding. Now, if you go direct to a scaffolding company, you should be able to get the scaffolding erected for somewhere in the region of £1,500 to £2,000, depending on where you live and how busy it is at that time of year. So there could be a huge saving. It could be anything up to £5,000 saving. And all it involves from your side is making a few phone calls to scaffolding companies or going online saying, I need a scaffolder on Google. You'll have lots of different options to choose from. Call a few up, say, I'm looking to get my loft done. I need the scaffolding put in place such and such a date. And they will give you a quote. And you will save a lot of money by doing that. The next cost saving area is the strip out. Your builder will need to strip out your existing loft. And it depends what's in your loft. You may have an old water tank up there. You may have lots of other things that need to be removed before they can start the build. And there will be a cost associated with that. And generally speaking, they will charge you somewhere in the region of maybe £2,000 to strip out your loft. Now that's something that you could bring somebody in to do. You could bring in a guy for one day and he'll go up and clear out everything in your loft that needs to be removed. So have a look at the quote that your builder gives you. If it has a big number in there for the strip out, and I'm not talking about removing the roof and removing all of the tiles because that is part of the build. This is simply removing anything in your loft that needs to be taken out before they can start work. So this is what they call preliminary work ahead of doing the actual build. So have a look at the quote. If it's got a prelims figure in there of £2,000, then challenge that. Speak to somebody who does loft clearances, get them in, and you might be able to get that done for something like £500. So you could save £1,500 just by doing that strip out yourself. And the whole point here, what I'm trying to get across, is that anything that your builder is subcontracting, you can do that yourself by making a phone call, getting somebody in and saving some money. The next point is the removal of waste. Now, there will be a lot of waste generated from your loft. Your builder is going to have to remove all of your tiles, all of the existing timber work that's at the back of the house to create the dormer, and there'll be lots and lots of materials that come out that need to be thrown in the skip. And your builder will allocate a cost to those skips. Now, this is again something else that's outsourced. Your builder will hire a skip firm, and they will have a rolling agreement that they'll put a skip somewhere on your property. Once it's full, they'll come, remove that full skip and replace it with an empty skip. So you may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 skip loads of material that is needing to be removed. And your builder will charge you a total for that. So you might have a figure anything up to £4,000 or £5,000 for skips, for waste removal. Now you can do that yourself. You can organise it yourself with the same skip companies, and it will be cheaper. It's pretty easy to manage. Your builder can coordinate with the skip firm once you've got it in place, but you might be able to save yourself a couple of £1,000s by organising the skips yourself. The next point is your tiling. So in your quote, your builder will probably include new tiles for the whole of your roof. So they strip off all of the old tiles, build the dormer, and then generally they will put new tiles back in place. And those new tiles will cost you something in the region of £2,000 to £3,000, or maybe more than that. Now, if you're really focused on the cost and you are really keen to keep it down, you can ask your builder to reuse your existing tiles. So as long as your tiles are in reasonable condition, then your builder will be able to reuse them. So it will save you some money because you're not having to buy new tiles, and it's also environmentally friendly. So if you're keen on trying to reuse and recycle things, then reusing your old tiles is a good idea, because it means that you're not having to throw them in the skip and in landfill and buy new ones. You're just basically taking them off and then putting them back on. And because you're removing all of the tiles from the front and the back, then it means that even if some of those are damaged or in bad condition, you may still be able to reuse the existing, because the portion of a loft at the back will be covered by a dormer, and therefore the tiles that have come off the back could be applied to the front if you've got a big damaged section or you've got some that are beyond repair. So it's a really easy way to save some money. It's good for the environment. It won't look quite as flash and bright and new. However, you can ask your builder to jet wash them. That will bring them back to life and generally will give you a better look and a better finish. But it's a really easy, quick way of saving some money off the original quote if you ask them not to buy new tiles and to just reuse. Okay, the next point is the internal fit out. Your builder will have to do the first fix and second fix of your electrics and plumbing, and they will also have to install insulation and then plaster all of your walls. So there's a couple of options here. If you want to go all the way, if you really want to try and save every last penny, then you could ask your builder just to construct a shell, which is a waterproof structure. So you build the dormer, put all of the windows in, and then just leave your property like that. And you could bring in an electrician and a plumber and somebody to do your plastering and insulation. You could manage all of that yourselves, and that will reduce your costs. It will be cheaper if you wanted to do that. Now, if that sounds like too much hassle and too much work and too much effort on your side, you could go halfway to that. So you could ask your builder to take your build to the end of the first fix. So basically what that would mean, they would put all of the cabling in, all of the pipework in, they would put all the insulation in, plaster, and then they would leave your property with cables hanging out of the walls, with pipes hanging out of the walls, ready for the second fix. So that would mean you bringing in an electrician to put things like the sockets on the wall and the switches and the bulbs in, and a plumber to come in to fit your shower controls, your shower head and your radiators. And then you'd basically just need to finish the decorating. So there's two options there to save some money. The bigger option involves more work for you. It's still outsourcing all of the work, so you're not doing the work, but you will need to coordinate the different trades more. If you don't want to go to that hassle, then just getting them in to do the final fittings is a much easier way, and you will still definitely save money doing it that way round. And the final point, the final tip here is decorating. So decorating is an expensive part of the job. And if you ask your builder to split out your quote, you might find that the decorating is a really large number that surprises you. So I've seen quotes where the decorating has been £10,000 and above. And that is literally to whitewash the walls and then paint it in magnolia and white ceilings. So it is really, really expensive. So you've got a couple of options there. You can outsource all of that. So get the quote that your builder's given you. If it says your decorating is £6,000, for example, get somebody in, ask them how much they would charge to do exactly what your builder's going to do. And if they're cheaper, bring them in. And they'll be a professional as well. So you'll be hiring somebody that you can see reviews of, that you can check out and make sure you're comfortable with. Because sometimes your builder might try to cut his costs by getting his labourers or one of his other staff to do the decorating, because everybody sees decorating as an easy to complete job, when actually you do need somebody who's skilled doing it. Otherwise, the finish will let you down. So there is a really easy way to save money and also stay in control of the quality of the finish, because we've dealt with a lot of lofts where the paintwork has been a bit disappointing because it hasn't been done by a professional. So make sure it is done by a professional, and if you can save costs at the same time, then that's fantastic. So hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully that's given you an insight into how the costs for a loft are put together. Your builder will be in control of quite a lot of the costs, but there is a big portion that he outsources. So anything that he's outsourcing, you can step in and outsource that yourself to somebody directly for a lower cost, and it will save you money. And when you add up all the different things we've just talked about, this can be tens of thousands of pounds. You might be able to save anything up to £20,000 on your loft by doing all of this yourself. There's a little bit of hassle for you because you've got to make some phone calls and speak to some people, but that actually gives you a benefit, because by having a direct relationship with the electrician and the plumber and the scaffolder and the painter, it means that they will be more concerned about the quality of their work and making sure that you're happy, rather than if they're just working as a subcontractor for the builder, they might not have that same level of care. So hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully that has opened your eyes as to how to go about chopping some of the cost off your build. But the key to it all, as I said right at the beginning, is getting a detailed quote. Because once you've got that detailed quote, you can then use that to argue with your builder to say, actually, you're trying to charge me £5,000 for scaffolding. I can get scaffolding for £2,000. Therefore, either I will do it myself, or you cut your cost to £2,000 and you can still organise it. And that's a really effective way of getting your builder to reduce his quote, by market testing all of his prices and saying that you could do it yourself if you wanted to. So hopefully that's really useful. You've enjoyed that. It's been something that will help you going forward with your project. If you've liked what I've said, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.